So Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to chapter 2 of the special sessions that we're doing in commemoration of Gita Jayanthi, which is happening later this month, actually just a week's time from now, on December 23rd. And one of the things that we forgot to cover yesterday is why should any one of us read the Bhagavad Gita? So in this regard, there is a very nice set of instructions from Sripad Shankaracharya. Originally, these verses were actually spoken by Lord Shiva to Parvati Devi when Parvati Devi requests Lord Shiva to explain the significance of the Bhagavad Gita. Later on, and that is that particular reference of the conversation between Lord Shiva and Parvati is there in the Padma Purana. Later on, Adi Shankaracharya, who's known to be an incarnation of Lord Shiva, also speaks these verses, which is called the Gita Mahatmya. There are 7 verses in this Gita Mahatmya that explains the benefits of reading the Bhagavad Gita every day. I will not go over all the 7 verses, but I will probably look at 2 or 3 verses that explains why it is so beneficial for us to read the Bhagavad Gita, even if it means we may not understand everything that we read. Reading is nice, reading and understanding is better. Reading and understanding and applying is even better. So in the very first text of this Gita Mahatmya, Sripad Shankaracharya writes, Gita Shastram idam punyam yaf patet prayataf pumam Vishnu padam avapnoti bhaya shokadi varjitaha. Bhaya and shoka, fear and lamentation and distress. As we learned yesterday, the chapter 1 is titled Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Arjuna is lamenting about problems that he's facing. So this particular shloka, the very first text of the Gita Mahatmya, the translation of this shloka that we just read is, one who, with a regulated mind, recites with devotion this Bhagavad Gita scripture, which is the bestower of all virtue, meaning good qualities, will attain to a holy abode such as Vaikuntha, the residence of Lord Vishnu, which is always free from the mundane qualities based on fear and lamentation. Which means if you read the Bhagavad Gita, your destination would be Vaikuntha, which is where Lord Narayana resides. And that place is a place where there is no fear and there is no lamentation. That is text 1. In text 3, Sripad Shankaracharya writes, Maline mochanam pumsam jalasnanam dine dine sakrit gitamrita snanam samsara malanashanam. This shloka translates as, one may cleanse himself daily by taking a bath in water. But if one takes a bath even once in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad Gita, for him, the dirt of material life is altogether vanquished. So we cleanse our external body using water. We can cleanse the dirt accumulated over millions of lifetimes through millions of births. Even if once we immerse ourselves in the message and the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita. And the last shloka, which is verse number 7, Shripad Adi Shankaracharya gives us 4 instructions on what we should do. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Geetam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantrastasya Namani Yani Karnyapekam Tasya Devasya Seva. So here Shankaracharya says, there need to be only one holy scripture, the divine Bhagavad Gita, sung by Lord Sri Krishna. Only one worshipable Lord, Lord Sri Krishna. Only one mantra, which is his holy names. And only one duty, which is serving the Supreme Lord, Krishna. So the 4 instructions to us are, if at all we had a choice in selecting one scripture to read over and over and over and over and over again, we should prioritize the Bhagavad Gita. If we want to worship the Lord, there is only one Lord to worship. That is Devaki Putra. If at all there is one mantra that you should recite, Shankaracharya is saying, we should recite all the holy names of Lord Krishna, Lord Hari. And today we will talk about duties and responsibilities in chapter 2. We have so many duties and responsibilities because we have so many different identities. But the most important duty and responsibility for you and me is to serve the Supreme Lord. That should be our first priority. That's what Shankaracharya is telling us in this Gita Mahatmya. So what happened yesterday? Yesterday, apparently the 2 parties were on different sides of the battlefield. And suddenly something interesting happened. Arjuna is facing a crisis in faith. And we said similarly, we will also experience such difficulties in our life. And when these difficulties come in our life, it's a wake-up call for us. It's like an alarm going off in the morning. You know, some of us have a tendency to wake up without an alarm clock. That's very nice. Some of us set the alarm clock, but we are able to wake up even before the alarm clock goes off. That's even nice. You know, some of us wake up after the alarm clock goes up and we become a little bit lazy in getting out of bed. We may delay getting out of bed. I'm sure most of us understand this symptom. And then there are those of us who hear the alarm clock or who may not even hear the alarm clock and continue sleeping. So we know some personalities like that also. So when difficulties come in our life, it's an alarm clock. The question is, do you recognize that it is a difficulty or are you asleep? If you've recognized it's a difficulty, are you going to do something about it? Or are you going to postpone your decision making? If you're really alert, you recognize it's a difficulty and you go seek help. So the situation that Arjuna is in is like a wake-up clock. But during the question and answer session, one of the questions that was asked yesterday is, why did Krishna speak this specifically to Arjuna and not to all of the other Pandavas? And we said, actually, all the Pandavas already have this knowledge. Arjuna is considered a Nitya Siddha, but because the Lord wanted to speak this knowledge, and he himself says why he speaks this knowledge in chapter 4, again, that Krishna temporarily puts Arjuna in a situation where he has forgotten that he is a self-realized man, which gives the opportunity for Krishna to speak this divine knowledge again. So although we are saying it's a wake-up call for Arjuna, Arjuna is already a self-realized. So this message is really for you and me that we have to wake up to the alarms that go off in our lives frequently, unexpected alarms in the form of difficulties. So when we face dilemmas and very difficult dilemmas in life, that's the time we should actually question what is life all about. Why am I suffering? And when you begin to question why you are suffering, the acharyas say you have begun your spiritual journey. You have become a spiritual seeker. Of course, sometimes we're still caught up in trying to find material solutions to material problems. But in today's chapter, we'll discover there are spiritual solutions to all material problems. Yes, there are material solutions also, but the lens we should use to solve our material problems is actually the spiritual lens first. That will become evident when Krishna begins to speak to Arjuna in chapter 2. Now, I want to share chapter 1 again so that we can look at a different facet of the chapter. How different personalities deal with life, deal with the concept and the presence of the Lord. So let's look at this. So if you look at this, chapter 1, the first 12 shlokas, 12, 14 shlokas, I would say. What is Dhritarashtra's focus? My sons. What is Duryodhana's focus? If you look at the shlokas that where Duryodhana speaks, or Sanjaya is relaying to Dhritarashtra what Duryodhana is saying on the battlefield. What is Duryodhana's focus? All these fighters on the other side, all these fighters on my side, and he names them. Bhima, Arjuna, Yuyudhana, Virata, Drupada, Drishtaketu, Chekitana, Kashiraja, Purujit, Kunti Bhoja, Shaibya. And he's not done. Yudhamanyu, Uttamauja. All these are great warriors. And then he comes to his side. Oh, yes, we have on our side Bhishma, Karna, Kripa, Ashwathama, Vikarna, and the son of Somadatta called Burishrava. There are other many great heroes who are prepared to lay down their lives for me, he says. Everybody with all kinds of different weapons, different levels of experience in the military arts. My strength, our strength is immeasurable. The strength of the Pandavas, not so good, because we are covered by Bhishma Dev. They have just Bhima. Bhima's power compared to capacity compared to Bhishma Dev is limited. So, has he once acknowledged the presence of the Supreme Lord Krishna on the battlefield? He names all the warriors. Krishna's name is very difficult to come at the lips of someone who's materially motivated. The Supreme Lord is there, not once has he acknowledged the presence of the Lord. This also reveals the mindset of Duryodhana. And His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu says, this is a perfect example of a godless assessment of the situation on the ground. When there is no God in your life, you are trying to figure out things on your own and thinking you can conquer all kinds of situations just by making this adjustment or that adjustment, or this commitment or lack of commitment. So just look at the mood of Duryodhana. The Lord is there. Not once has he mentioned his name, but he's called out all the warriors' names, how powerful they are, how great they are. He's feeling very proud about his side. He does not have a clue what's about to come his way. Now, after Duryodhana speaks, what else happens? Arjuna starts speaking. How does Arjuna start speaking? Arjuna says, take me to the middle of the battlefield. The middle of the battlefield is considered a no man's land. That's not where you do battle. When the Lord takes Arjuna's chariot to the middle of the battlefield, Arjuna can see the opposing side. And he can also see his own side as well. So it's considered a no man's land. What is Arjuna's mood compared to Duryodhana? He says, my dear Krishna. What is he calling Krishna? Oh, infallible one, Achyuta. Achyuta means you don't make any mistakes. Please draw my chariot between the two armies so that I may see those present here who desire to fight and with whom I must contend in this great trial of arms. So he's making a request of the Lord. Can you do this? But how is he addressing the Lord? Achyuta. Now, so Duryodhana does not acknowledge the presence of the Lord. Arjuna does. So Duryodhana's situation is a godless assessment of the factions on the battlefield. Whereas Arjuna's assessment is considered to be God conscious but confused. Duryodhana is not confused. He's very clear. He wants a material outcome. Arjuna acknowledges the Lord, but at the same time, he becomes very quickly confused. So, a godless person assessing the situation versus a godly person getting thoroughly confused. And Arjuna very intelligently, very deftly throughout the first chapter and as well as throughout the Bhagavad Gita uses different names of Krishna to invoke different feelings and responses and to also convey different messages to Krishna. So, for example, he calls Krishna Janardana. Hey Krishna, you are the maintainer of all of us. How is it that you are going to allow such kind of destruction on the battlefield? He calls Krishna, hey Govinda. The word Govinda means someone who brings pleasure to all. Krishna brings pleasure to all. Someone who satisfies us. If your name is Govinda and your duty is to satisfy all of us, that's your role. How is it that I am in this situation? Then he calls Krishna Keshava, the killer of the Keshi demon. Yes, you have killed demons, but my family members They may be degraded, but they are not demons. I don't consider them demons. And indirectly, Arjuna is beginning to say, actually, the demons are in my mind. Just like you killed the Keshi demon, I want you to kill the demons of doubt that have arisen in my mind. So you see how deftly Arjuna addresses Krishna through his various names. He also calls him Madhusudana. Hey, I thought Madhu was one of your forefathers. The Vishnu dynasty emanates from Madhu, but you killed your own ancestor. That's why you call Madhusudana. He calls him Madhava. You are the husband of the goddess of fortune. Wherever you are, there should only be fortune, because wherever you are, Lakshmi Devi is there. So how can you allow this kind of misfortune to befall all of us? So Arjuna is trying to invoke various feelings in Krishna as he's speaking to him and conveying to him the sudden anxiety and uncertainty that has crept into his heart, into his mind. The other way to look at it, I was listening to some lecture and reviewing some notes. You know, sometimes you accept the truth intellectually, but until you accept the truth from your heart, no transformation can happen. So we learn that in chapter 2 today, where Arjuna will say in Shloka 7, Shishyasteham Shadimam Tvam Prapannam. He says, I am a surrendered soul to you. Although Arjuna is using the word surrender, it is just an intellectual surrender. It is not a surrender of the heart. The surrender of the heart happens in chapter 11. But the process of surrender has begun in chapter 2. At least intellectually, Arjuna is saying, you know what, I'm in great difficulty. I think I need your help. So it's very interesting how you can get deeper and deeper and deeper into the Bhagavad Gita and learn so many different facets of how actually this entire Bhagavad Gita is addressing our life problems and how we should actually approach these problems. So we talked, although this was not recorded in the session yesterday, it came in the question and answers. There are two ways to look at problems. Our instinct in life is to leave or abandon the problem rather than learning from the problematic situation. So Arjuna is complaining, I can't bear this predicament that I am in. I need to leave the battlefield. And if by leaving the battlefield, I will change my situation, and therefore I'm going to change the outcome. And we said that even when we face problems, our instinct is to escape. It seems very natural for us to either put a distance between us and that situation, physically or emotionally, because any problem brings about discomfort. And we are not comfortable with difficult situations. It causes us discomfort. So what do we try to do? We try to make external adjustments to solve our problems, whereas the entire Bhagavad Gita is about making internal transformation to help you deal with problems confidently. So everything may start with why me? But if you go on the spiritual journey, you'll come to the conclusion, why not me? If not me, should this be on someone else? So the whole objective of this particular first chapter is to indicate to us, when you have a problem, how can you learn and grow from this? Instead of just simply bemoaning and saying, these are all the problems, these are all the potential outcomes. We know the 4 reasons that Arjuna gives, which we can look at. Right? From compassion, these are my family members, to if I kill them, I can't enjoy afterwards, to after I kill, I don't want to take up the sin. What about the destruction of all of the things that we hold dear to us, which is families, family members, family traditions? There will be no family welfare and community projects, Arjuna says. And then the 5th reason Arjuna gives in chapter 2, which we will look at today. So we also said the single word summary for yesterday's chapter was lamentation. Arjuna is lamenting, complaining. I am in too difficult of a situation. I don't want to solve it. I want to run away. So before we get into the slides today, let's look at the trajectory of chapter 2. The initial set of shlokas will help us set the stage for when the Lord begins to speak. As we said, the actual Bhagavad Gita begins from 2.11 when the Lord begins to speak. Although the Lord speaks one verse before that, we'll look at how chapter 2 begins and then we'll go to the slides. So chapter 2 is considered Sankhya Yoga. It's titled Sankhya Yoga. It has 72 shlokas. And in this particular chapter, Arjuna is going to find out who he is. Now you may ask, come on, Arjuna knows who he is. No, actually he has forgotten who he is in chapter 1. And therefore Krishna has to begin the process of helping Arjuna understand his true identity. Because there's some amount of amnesia that has crept in chapter 1. And that amnesia has to be gently but firmly addressed by the Supreme Lord. But it begins with Arjuna making that request. So let's look at how chapter 2 starts. Sanjaya said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words. So here's the first verse that the Lord speaks in chapter 2. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, my dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. So what is Krishna doing? Is Krishna saying, oh, poor Arjuna, I feel so bad for you. You're going through such tough times. Come here, let me give you a hug. Krishna is very strict with Arjuna. He's saying, what's wrong with you? Aren't you supposed to be a great warrior? You are talking like as if you don't understand what's the value of life. If you continue down this path, guess what? You are not going to the heavenly planets. Your name, everything will be destroyed if you walk away from this battlefield. So Krishna immediately chastises Arjuna. And then he pleads or coaxes him in Shloka 3. He says, O son of Pritha, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. Krishna saying, why this sudden weakness that has come over you? Give up this weakness of the heart. Stop being inappropriately compassionate. And Krishna is praising him by calling Arjuna, O chastiser of the enemy. Dhananjaya, Parantapa. Parantapa means chastiser of the enemy. So you think Arjuna was sufficiently chastised after Krishna speaks to him like this? No. Arjuna is building his case still. So what is Arjuna saying in Shloka 4? O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counteract with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? So it's almost he's challenging Krishna. Have you ever killed your teacher? You ever killed your grandfather? Aren't your teachers and grandfathers worshipable personalities? So Arjuna is asking a rhetorical question. How do you expect me to do this? And Arjuna is not done. He's continuing to build his case. It would be better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of the lives of great souls who are my teachers. Even though desiring worldly gain, they are superiors. If they are killed, everything we enjoy will be tainted with blood. So what is Arjuna telling Krishna? Better for me to go beg on the streets than to kill great souls, especially great souls who are my teachers, who are my teachers. Yeah, maybe they want a kingdom and something else. Nevertheless, they are so senior to me. So if they are killed, Arjuna says, then everything becomes contaminated. The victory itself becomes contaminated. And then Arjuna gives his fifth reason. Nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live. Yet they are now standing before us on the battlefield. Which is better? Arjuna saying, I don't know which is better. Me defeating them or they defeating me? Now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. When Arjuna says, it's better for me to have a begging bowl in hand, as per our Vedic scriptures and Shastras, only Brahmanas, there is Varna and Ashrama. Only Brahmanas are allowed to beg. So there are so many instructions in our Shastras. Kshatriyas are not allowed to beg. Vaishyas are not allowed to beg. And neither is the working class. Similarly, if you look at the ashramas, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyas, Arjuna is a Grihastha He's married. He's got children. Grahasthas are not allowed to beg. Brahmacharis can beg. Vanaprasthas can beg. Sannyasis can beg. The fact that Arjuna is a Kshatriya and a Grahastha, both those conditions means he cannot beg. But he's pretending that he's become a Brahmana all of a sudden. But he knows he's in a problematic situation. So he asks for help. Who better to ask for help than your best friend, who's your charioteer? But here he has humbled himself to say, I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So this is an intellectual surrender. It's a surrender in just words. After many, many questions and answer sessions in chapter 11, Arjuna says, you know what? I understand now who you are. I understand you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it is only in chapter 18, Arjuna concludes saying, Karishye vachanam tava, I will do exactly as you say. You've answered all my questions. I've got my answers. Even if I disagree with you, I'll follow your instructions. So then Arjuna says, I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. And then the unspeakable thing happens. Sanjaya says, having spoken thus, Arjuna, the chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight. So in Shloka 7, he says, I am ready to I'm your disciple, I'm surrendering to you. But a change of mind again in Shloka 9 saying, actually, I will not fight. I have made my decision. So that's where we will begin session 2 today. So before we begin, let's offer our most humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today's chapter is how to manage stress. We've already discussed we will all encounter difficulties. We will all encounter obstacles. You can address your stress and difficult situations if you truly understand who you are. And who you are, your first identity is that you are a spirit soul. Yes, we are all occupying this body, so we have two types of duties. We have duties towards the body, but we also have duties towards the soul. Because actually, after we exit the body, the only thing remaining is the soul. So should we not address the duties relating to the soul? If we do, that's the path to permanent happiness. So we said chapter 1, single word summary is lamentation. And we said chapter 2, Krishna is going to slowly begin the process of establishing for Arjuna what his real identity is. Therefore, the single word summary for today's chapter is identity. Because if you don't know who you are, how do you know what's your duties and responsibilities? Every company issues an ID card. And different roles and different designations gives you different levels of responsibilities. So you have to understand your role and responsibility also. But first you have to understand who you are. Then you can understand what your roles and responsibilities are. Your roles and responsibilities you'll understand in chapter 3. Chapter 2, first you understand who you are. Then Krishna says, I will tell you what your duty and responsibility is. But we already know what the two duties are. Duty towards your body, duty towards your soul. So today's acronym, very appropriately, is Gita. G for Guru, I for identity, the two dharmas that Krishna speaks about, and how you can acquire a higher taste. What is this higher taste? We're going to discover quite soon here. So you can see that Arjuna is in a very confused situation. How do you know you're ready for a guru? When you know you don't have the answers to all the problematic situations in life, you know you're ready for a guru. How else do you know you're ready for a guru? When you realize you don't have all of the knowledge that is required to solve the problems in life, you know you're ready for a guru. How else do you know you're ready for a guru? You are humbled by a situation. Without that feeling of helplessness, why would you approach a guru? When you feel you know all the answers, as Duryodhana selected the Narayani Sena, he already knew he wanted the army. Why does he need God? So when there is confusion that besets us, at that time we are ready to seek answers. And that time you have to approach the right guru. All gurus are not equal. There is a bona fide guru and there are also false gurus. So the 2.7 shloka that we read, I will just read the Sanskrit here. Karpanya dosho pahatasva bhavaha prachame tvam dharma sammudha chetah yattreyasyan nishchitam bruhi tanme shishyasteham shadhiman tvam prapannam. So here is Arjuna finally acknowledging, you know what? I don't know all the answers. Because I'm in this bewildered state, Krishna, please step in and help me. So here, the student has surrendered to the Guru, but this is just the beginning of surrender, 2.7. Final surrender comes in chapter 18. There are different levels of surrender also. So the three keys to surrender is, one is you are eager to learn how to solve problematic situations. You have acknowledged that you are weak and you're ignorant. So remember, Arjuna has lost determination to fight in chapter 1. When do you lose determination to fight? When you have lost your vision about what is right and wrong. When you've lost sense of what is your duty. And more importantly, when you've lost sense of who you are. It is that loss of determination that Krishna has to paint a picture for Arjuna to help him regain that resolve to fight. It's not that Arjuna does not know how to fight. Arjuna has succumbed to his inner demons, to his inner enemies. In most cases, we are the enemies in the problematic situations that we face. So slowly, Krishna will encourage Arjuna how to embrace this difficult situation and lighten up or light up that inner warrior within him. Arjuna has given so many arguments. And if you and I look at these arguments, they seem to be quite reasonable, quite ethical also. Why should I kill? Maybe even borderline spiritual, the reasons that Arjuna is citing. But what does Krishna begin to do in chapter 2? He exposes Arjuna's weakness and begins to discourage him from exiting the battlefield. So Krishna very gently assures Arjuna that this situation actually gives Arjuna a unique opportunity to develop a greater level of self-awareness and spiritual consciousness. It is the spiritual consciousness that helps you develop immunity towards the chaotic ways of material life. Simultaneously, it's the spiritual consciousness that helps you connect to the source of power, the source of everything, which is the Supreme Lord. When you do both, then answers to challenging situations become very, very clear. So there's no mistake here that all of us are going to face problems. So it's this Arjuna's lack of spiritual vision in chapter 1, because of his fear that brings about this fear and dejection. What's come? What is it that I have to do and how am I going to handle myself? That Krishna has to address. This loss of determination is something that Krishna will slowly try and encourage Arjuna to retrieve. So, similarly, in difficult situations, many times we are very tempted to give up and walk away. So, the quality of our determination determines the quality of our life. But when you suddenly lack a vision, you lose your determination. And then suddenly life becomes meaningless. So Arjuna has done the unthinkable. No warrior sits down on the chariot. No warrior puts his hand in his heads on the battlefield, or the head in his hands on the battlefield. Why? Because Arjuna has lost sense of his identity. So he's gone into depression. And Krishna has to bring him out of this depression. So Arjuna seems to be ready for some help. He's reached a counselor. He's called that 800 number. And he's reached Krishna. So, yeah, it takes a lot of courage to accept failures in life and to also, more importantly, accept our own inner weaknesses. But unless we are ready to accept our weakness, how can we experience success in life? There is a saying that success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. So when you experience failure, everybody seems to abandon you. When you experience success, everybody is ready to partake of that success. So one lesson for us is, how to cultivate humility. We'll talk about humility a little later in one of the chapters. If we are not humble, then our false pride can really deviate us from the right path. When we practice spirituality, humility should be a natural outcome of practicing spirituality. A mature spiritualist will be genuinely humble. But our false ego often gets in the way of making this kind of spiritual progress. So the question for Arjuna is, who am I? Am I a Brahmana or a Kshatriya? Arjuna seems to suddenly say, I want to be a Brahmana. I want to go away to the forest. I will go begging. I don't care about the Kshatriya. But let's say if he goes to the forest and he goes begging, that's what he says he wants to do. Let's say he goes begging and the other person insults him. What's the nature of a Kshatriya when he's insulted? He'll pick up his arms, his sword, and begin to fight. because that's his nature. You can't change your nature simply because the situation presents difficulties. So this is something that Krishna will establish for Arjuna. You can't just suddenly decide tomorrow you'll be a Brahmana. How is that possible? Your inner nature has not changed, right? So this is the identity crisis that Arjuna is facing. The misplaced, mistaken identity is that I don't want to be a Kshatriya anymore. I want to be a Brahmana. No, you can't just disregard your natural instincts. And you cannot fake being a Brahmana. Unless you practice first becoming a Brahmana, you can't just suddenly become a Brahmana. So this is the unreal understanding that Arjuna has. He's looking at the external facets such as Varna and Ashrama. And Krishna has to say, who cares about Varna and Ashrama? Actually, first I want you to understand your spirit soul. So Krishna begins to speak. Let's come back. See what Krishna says. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Hey, Arjuna, if you claim that you are a Brahmana, let me tell you, Brahmanas are very wise. They will neither be joyous when there is birth, nor will they be despondent when there is death. The very fact that you are despondent about killing suggests that you are not a Brahmana. But you are very much pretending to speak like one because you're mourning for the body. So this shloka is very beautiful. So in this shloka, I'll just recite the Sanskrit. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Ashotshyan Anvashochastvam Prajna Vadamscha Bhashase Gatasuna Gadasumscha Nanushochanti Panditaha. So Krishna has not stopped chastising Arjuna. He says, hey Arjuna, you think you're a Brahmana? You're actually fool. And then begins Krishna's emphasis on the fact that the soul is the most important aspect here. You are focusing on the body. So Krishna says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Krishna is saying, I have always existed and I will continue to exist. You have always existed, you will continue to exist. All these kings have always existed, they will continue to exist in the future. So obviously, Krishna is not talking about the body. If they get killed, what doesn't exist? The body. What exists? The soul. Krishna is saying, by the way, do you really think you can kill the soul? And oh, by the way, do you really think you are the one doing the killing? In chapter 11, Krishna says, I've already killed them. That's my decision. The best you can do, Arjuna, is become my instrument. And thus begins the instruction of the soul. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptihi dhirastatra namuhyati. So Krishna says, as the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So Krishna is saying you're not sober because you're completely bewildered. A Brahmana is considered a sober person. So it is said that every single cell in our body gets replaced once in 7 years, which means Practically speaking, once in 7 years, you get a new body, which every single cell apparently gets replaced. So Krishna is saying, don't you see? The body is constantly undergoing change. So similarly, the soul also will simply exit this body and enter another body. The soul will simply change its dress and attire. The body undergoes these 6 changes. It takes birth, it grows, it sustains itself, it produces some byproducts, it begins to dwindle, and then it dies. But the soul does not undergo these 6 changes. There was never a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings. Which means the soul is eternal. It never took birth, it always existed. Krishna always existed. Every soul always existed and will continue to maintain that independent existence. I think someone asked about the difference between mind and the body yesterday. So here is the answer. So our body is comprised of 2 things, what you can see and what you cannot see. What you can see is made up of the 5 elements: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. What you cannot see is called the subtle body, which is your mind, intelligence, and false ego. So what happens at death? The soul simply has to exit this physical body. It takes the subtle body along with it and enters a new physical body. So at the time of death, you have to give up your physical body that you can see. At the time of death, your subtle body still exists. The soul simply carries your mind, intelligence, and ego and enters a new physical body. So death simply means loss of physical body. And that's why Krishna is saying, you're not a very sober person, you don't even understand this. Brahmanas understand this because they are learned in the scriptures. So what happens at the time of moksha, liberation? At the time that the soul is ready to enter the spiritual world again, it has to give up its subtle body also. So moksha means giving up the gross body and the subtle body. So all your past memories, your acquisition of knowledge, all of that has to be given up because all of that is based on the material platform. In order for you to enter the spiritual world, but the soul is eternal. So when there is moksha, only the soul enters the spiritual world, nothing else. But the soul also has its original spiritual body. So it takes back that original spiritual identity, it takes that back at the time of moksha. You would have heard this term Satchidananda. The soul's original position is this Satchidananda. It always exists. It's full of knowledge in its original constitutional position, and it is always blissful. The soul is searching for this happiness. But because the soul has acquired this material body, the body begins to dictate what is happiness. And the soul is still searching, where is that ananda that I'm looking for? So it is said that there are 5 types of mokshas. One is called Sayujya moksha. In Sayujya moksha, in this type of liberation, the soul simply merges with Brahman. Then there is a moksha called Salokya moksha. In this kind of moksha, the soul enters the loka, the spiritual loka, and resides in the spiritual world. Another kind of moksha is called sarupya. In this kind of moksha, the soul acquires a body exactly like the Supreme Lord. We are talking about Vaikuntha, the four-handed Narayana. So if you enter Vaikuntha, everybody will look alike. Everybody will have four hands. How do you know which is Vishnu? Ah, yes, there are special characteristics for Vishnu. So we talked about Sayujya, Salokya, Sarupya. Then Sarshti is another kind of moksha. Sarshti means when you enter the spiritual planet, you will have the same set of opulences that the Lord has. And then there is Samipya. Samipya means this kind of liberation. You are engaged personally with the Lord. You are personally serving the Lord. So you have a close relationship with the Lord. So these are the 5 types of mokshas in Vaishnava culture. We don't consider Sayujya to be actually moksha because there is a risk of you coming back into the material world and taking birth again. Even the other 4 mokshas are not accepted by Vaishnava, by at least the Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara, because for us, we are actually not searching for moksha. We only want one thing. In the Bhakti Marg, we are only looking to serve the Lord. That's all. Wherever He is, we want to be. If He's in the material world, we want to be here. If His devotees are here in the material world, we want to serve His devotees. So the Vaishnava philosophy is quite a unique philosophy. We are taught not to follow or even seek moksha. If the Lord wants to give you moksha, He'll give you moksha. Why you should ask for that also? Our duty is only to worship the Lord and serve Him very nicely. So anyway, Krishna begins to talk about this one. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapo, na shoshayati marudaha. Krishna is telling Arjuna, hey Arjuna, the soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. Krishna is saying, don't worry, Arjuna. They all will continue to exist. You may think you're killing them, but actually, what is being destroyed is their physical body. Their soul is eternal. Don't worry. If they die on the battlefield, they are assured of a next birth. So essentially, the crux is that Krishna is telling Arjuna, all the complaints that you've been giving me in chapter 1 and chapter 2, all of that was based on the physical platform. No? I have to kind of change your vision now to focus on the spiritual platform. And the soul is eternally spiritual in nature. So some of these facts are directly from the Bhagavad Gita and some are from other Shastras. So it is said, what is the size of a soul? Krishna says the soul is invisible, but there are other Shastras that describe what could be the size of the soul. If I pluck out one strand of hair, take that, the very edge of the tip, take that tip, break it, cut it into 100 pieces. Take one of those 100 pieces, cut it into another 100 pieces. One of those pieces is the size of the soul. Where does the soul reside? It is said in the vicinity of the heart. So when we were talking about surrender at an intellectual level and surrender of the heart, we are actually talking about the surrender of the soul. When the Jivatma surrenders to Paramatma, then the Jivatma will experience Ananda. Until then, the Jivatma is fighting with himself and fighting with material nature, which is the 3 gunas. The soul is conscious. As long as the soul exists in any body, you will see this birth, death, reproduction, then old age and death. So consciousness only exists in the body if the soul is residing in that body. So even if someone is in a coma, medical coma, they are not dead because the soul is still helping them breathe and maintain that body. Of course, externally other maintenance may be happening. The soul does not undergo the 6 changes that we just talked about. The soul transmigrates from one body to another until it releases itself from this material cycle. The soul is Satchidananda. And the most important thing is the soul is searching for God. And of course, Krishna says, fireproof, waterproof, unbreakable, undissolvable, all of that. 2 important things to remember from this slide is consciousness exists because of the presence of the soul. Without the soul, there can be no consciousness. Therefore, the symptom of the soul is consciousness. Another symptom of the soul is that the soul is searching for God. It's searching for the source from which it has come. Therefore, it is seeking God. So, the conclusion is that the soul is eternal and indestructible. So that means, by contrast, material nature is temporary. Your body is temporary, your mind is temporary, your intelligence is temporary. So Krishna is saying, don't be bewildered by the temporary. That's how I've designed this place. You can't do anything about it. So death is inevitable. For a Kshatriya, death on the battlefield is a glorious death. Even if they are defeated. Even if they are on the side that loses. So throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's focus is on dharma and not on karma. Arjuna was worried about the karmic reactions that he will get. Krishna is saying, I don't want you to worry about the karmic reactions. I want you to worry about dharma first. Karma and the reactions are in my hands. Why are you worried about it? So the emphasis throughout the Bhagavad Gita is dharma over karma. Don't worry about karma. Worry about your dharma. Therefore, duties and responsibilities become important, because Krishna says, if everybody performs their duties and responsibilities very nicely as per the Vedic scriptures, as per Varnashrama, then slowly the consciousness will undergo purification and finally reach Paramatma. Krishna also talks about reincarnation. Jatasya hidrovo mrityuho dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmadapariharyerthe natvam shochitam arhasi. Krishna says, one who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, Arjuna, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you can't escape your duty. Stop lamenting. You don't even want to perform your duty, you're complaining. What is the duty of a Kshatriya? To uphold Dharma. You don't even want to do that and you're complaining? So Krishna is saying, I want you to focus on your Dharma. Stop with this shoka. So then Krishna speaks about the 2 dharmas. What is the Swadharma? We all have dharma towards our body. What is this body? It's not just our body. It includes the bodies of our family members, which means relationships. Then you go even broader relationships into society, into states, into nations, maybe even into planets. So Krishna is not saying that your family responsibilities are not important. Quite the contrary. Krishna says your family responsibilities you have to do. You don't have a choice there. But hey Arjuna, have you ever considered your Nitya Dharma, which is the Sanatana Dharma, which is the Dharma of the soul? So, what is this dharma of the soul? We said the soul is always searching for God. It's searching for that source from which it has come, that source of happiness, that source of eternity, immortality, the source of pure knowledge. So, what's the food for the soul? The food for the soul is reading the scriptures, performing devotional service, chanting, spending time with other devotees. There are three ways in which we learn, or the Shastras say there are three sources of knowledge for us: Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Guru, we've already talked about very briefly when we heard Arjuna say, I'm your disciple now. Sadhu means those who are proficient in scriptures. They may or may not be self realized souls. Sadhu could also mean fellow devotees who are practitioners on this path. Shastra is the other source of knowledge. So, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. These three things, facets, has to come together if you want to learn about Sanatana Dharma, which is actually the Dharma of the soul. Every day, we may be using those words, Sanatana Dharma. We've actually not understood what these words mean. We look at it as Vedic culture. Vedic culture dwells on the soul, on the Atma. That is Sanatana Dharma. It does not negate Swadharma. It emphasizes Nitya Dharma. Just as much as we spend a whole lot of money on taking care of our body throughout our lives, we don't spend any money on taking care of our soul. There is zero ROI taking care of your body. There is unlimited ROI when you take care of your soul. But we are so ignorant, we don't know this. After nicely spending all time, energy, effort taking care of your body, you have to give up this body. After neglecting your soul all your life, you end up in another body and continue the same cycle. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, focus on not just your Swadharma, but also on your Nitya Dharma. Therefore, I have to tell you about all the soul and all of that. So these are the two dharmas that Krishna speaks about in chapter 2. So neglecting our higher dharma and only performing swadharma, the analogy used here is you are very nicely taking care of the cage, but not caring for the bird that is residing inside the cage, which means you're taking care of this body very nicely. But if you keep neglecting the soul, what will happen? You will just continuously have this cycle of birth, death, old age, disease. You don't have a choice. And the soul is moving further and further and further away from Krishna through this process. Sanatana Dharma says the soul's duty is to get closer to Krishna and exit the cycle of birth and death. So Krishna then says, okay, you know what to do. We are in this material body, we have attachment to our family members, we have so many desires. So if somebody asks, how can I give up all those desires? Krishna says, you don't have to give up desires because no human being can live without a desire. If you don't have a desire to get out of bed and do something in life, what a miserable life it is. So it is desires that drive us, that motivate us, that help us with our determination. But Krishna is saying there are two kinds of desires and two kinds of tastes. You have material desires, but at the same time, don't forget to feed your spiritual desires. Material desires lead to sukha or happiness. Spiritual desires leads to ananda or bliss. Two specific words with very different meanings. Happiness is not the same as bliss. Happiness is temporary. Bliss is permanent. So how do you develop this higher taste? Krishna says, well, first of all, let's understand lower taste. Then you yourself do comparison and figure out which is better. Lower taste dwells on the body. What happens? Your senses are going to dwell on so many things. Your eyes dwell on things, your nose dwells on things, your skin may dwell on things, your ears dwell on things. And when they start dwelling on these things, they get attached. And when attachment arises, your desire and lust for more increases. And when your desires are not fulfilled, what happens? Krishna says you become angry. And when you become angry, what happens? Krishna says you become bewildered, you become confused, you lose your intelligence. And when you lose your intelligence, what is Krishna saying? You lose your ability to discriminate between what is right and wrong. And when you lose your discriminatory power, that's when society begins to degrade. There is more rape, there is more crimes, there is more suicide, there is more adharma happening in society because of this cycle that Krishna lays out here in chapter 2. So Krishna says, beware of lust. So in this particular shloka, Krishna is saying, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamaha Kamat Krodho Bhijayate. Krishna is saying, while contemplating the objects of the senses, whatever it is, so if the eyes are looking at flowers, or eyes are looking at a beautiful woman or a beautiful child, the ears are listening to music. So these are all considered objects of the senses. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. So let us say I'm an alcoholic. I got addicted to alcohol, but I've gone through some treatment. So I've stopped drinking alcohol, but that doesn't mean I've stopped thinking about alcohol. If you talk to people with problems with addiction, I had a friend in the US, a colleague actually. Every year, he would proudly come and tell me, this is the 11th year that I have not smoked a cigarette. Which means, even after 11 years of giving up smoking cigarette, he's still thinking about the fact that he used to smoke cigarette. He's not forgotten. Okay, in a way, you could say that's nice. So even though you may have given up a bad habit, doesn't mean your mind is not dwelling on it. That's the danger for the mind. Yes. So Krishna is saying, then you learn to replace your lower tastes with higher tastes. So Prabhupada said, if you're a drug addict, I will give you the best drug. The best drug is Krishna consciousness. You practice Krishna consciousness, you will forget all your other drugs because you will get on the highest of high you will get when you're actually practicing Krishna consciousness. That's what Prabhupada would tell his early disciples who were all actually drug addicts. Some of them were drug addicts. So how do you develop the higher taste? Well, you have to train your mind, you have to train your senses. How do you do that? You have to regulate your senses. Regulate means we have to follow certain do's and don'ts in life that are laid out in the scriptures for us, for our benefit. By regulating your senses, then your mind remains in an undisturbed state, or at least a least disturbed state, I would say. And slowly, because this process is working by regulation, you develop the taste to stick to the path of practicing Krishna consciousness, which will bring you ananda. So by developing a new taste, a higher taste, a better taste, which is a spiritual taste, you will slowly start replacing all your lower tastes. Your tastes that are taking you away from Krishna can be replaced by developing a taste for Krishna. You don't need any other de-addiction program. This is the best de-addiction program for you, which is practicing Krishna consciousness. Krishna, throughout the Bhagavad Gita, uses many, many analogies to hammer home the point that he is making. So, a couple of analogies that Krishna uses is Yada samharate chayam kurmongani vasarvashah indriyan indriyartebhyah tasya prajna pratishtita. Krishna is saying, one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So when your senses impact you with all these sense objects, Krishna is saying, withdraw within. Then you're protected. Then Krishna says, how do you experience this higher taste? Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinah rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. So, as I was mentioning, addicts still remember that they were addicts. They never forget it. That means the taste is still there, although they have exercised self control now. But seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. There are many, many examples of relapses happening. Even addicts. Actually, I visited a hospital recently, and the CEO of the hospital, I happened to be visiting the CEO of the hospital, and inside his office room, he had this wall of cameras, camera in each of the patient rooms. We just happened to be talking about problems in life and how people create problems for others by their lack of understanding and discipline. So he pointed me to one room. I couldn't see the patient there because he was sitting in the side. And he told me, do you know, this man has caused so much distress for his 80-year-old mother. He was addicted to alcohol, addicted to drugs. We treated him. We cheated him by not releasing him from the hospital back to his mother after the treatment. We took him straight to the rehab center. He was there for 9 months and he was free from his addiction finally. And then one day he met his old friend who said, come on, let's go have biryani. And along with biryani came a glass of alcohol. And he relapsed and he was in that hospital. And I asked him, how is he doing? He said he has to be sedated because he's become so violent. So, so you have to develop higher taste to be fixed up and firm in your desire to overcome the beasts and demons that we are dealing with. One more analogy Krishna uses is a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So Krishna is saying desires will keep coming. How? Like rivers flowing into the ocean, they will keep coming. The mind will keep cooking up all kinds of new desires. But just like the ocean is calm, calm meaning it doesn't overflow its boundaries. It just accepts the water and accepts more water and accepts more water. So we should also handle desires like this. Just stay calm, like the ocean. Don't try to satisfy the lower desires, because the minute you do that, you're done. You're moving away from spirituality. So here's the last slide for today. Arjuna has given 5 reasons why he should not fight. Krishna has defeated all his arguments in this particular chapter. If Arjuna says, oh, they are my family, Krishna says, why are you worried about the body? They are all souls. They will take new birth. What's your problem? Don't you understand this? Arjuna says, "Oh, how can I enjoy myself?" Krishna says, "Well, why don't you fight the battle? If you win, you will enjoy the kingdom. If you lose, also you will enjoy." Well, how do you enjoy yourself if you lose? What Krishna means is that, hey Arjuna, if you fight, if you win, you will enjoy your kingdom. If you fight and you lose your life, for a soldier who loses their life on the battlefield, irregardless of which side they are on, their next destination is the heavenly planets where they will go and enjoy themselves even more than how they have enjoyed themselves on planet Earth. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, if you win, you win. If you lose, you win. So what's your problem? Any which way you'll enjoy. Either you'll enjoy here or you'll enjoy in the heavenly planets. What's your problem? Then Arjuna says, nah, but what about family? What about traditions? Krishna says, don't you know the whole essence of Varnashrama Dharma and following the Vedic scriptures is to serve me. If you don't serve me, what family tradition will exist? What's the use of all these useless family traditions without me in the center? Of course, Krishna says this in chapter 15 that the essence of all of the Vedas is to serve Krishna. To Arjuna's complaint, but then what about all these sins? Krishna says, if you're fighting on my instructions, there is no sin. Did you really think you killed? I've brought an end to all these people's life just by mere presence. Actually, Acharyas say, when Krishna looked at the opposing side, immediately all their lifespans reduced. So there is this wonderful analogy that if you are a soldier and you kill someone on the battlefield, that government rewards you for your bravery. If that same soldier, even if he is in uniform, if he kills his neighbor, that same government will come and arrest you. It doesn't care. So similarly, Krishna is saying, if you kill on my instructions, because that is your dharma, you need not worry about sinful reactions. You will be rewarded. But if you don't fight, well, you are going to be incurring sins. And when Arjuna says, I don't know which is better, me killing them, they killing me, Krishna says, definitely you killing them is better because they are sinful people. Sinful people have to be killed because we have to put an end to the sinful ways. If you allow sinful people to flourish, dharma will just disintegrate in front of your eyes. And then what's left for the future generations if there's no dharma? So, like this, Krishna has defeated Arjuna's complaints one by one. To summarize today's chapter, acronym is Gita. We heard what is surrender. First of all, you have to be eager to learn. You have to have a certain level of humility. You have to have the courage to acknowledge that you don't know everything and approach a guru. Identity. What's this idea of self? Our identity is that we have a physical body, we have a gross body, and we have a soul. And the fact that if you take birth, you are going to die. If you die, you are going to take birth again until you reach the point where the soul exits the body and goes back to the spiritual world. There are two dharmas based on the body and the soul. Both are important. What is most important is the duty towards the soul. There are lower tastes and higher tastes. How do you deal with the lower tastes? You just develop higher tastes, an attraction for higher taste. Automatically, the lower taste will get subdued. And that is the um, destination that you're seeking, which is Ananda. So today's chapter is called Sankhya Yoga, and the single word summary is identity. So Krishna is establishing for Arjuna that everybody is a spirit soul first. The spirit soul just happens to be occupying a machine called this body. This body is temporary. Therefore, do not lament for the machine. Rather, you should be worried about the soul. So, in this way, Krishna has begun to try to reduce the level of amnesia that Arjuna is experiencing. Tomorrow, now that he has established his identity, now that you know that you are not just this body, you are the spirit soul, then what are your duties and responsibilities? So the job description for Arjuna or for the Jivatma comes tomorrow in the chapter called Karma Yoga. So do join us tomorrow to understand what your duties and responsibilities are, as Krishna will explain in chapter 3. Hare Krishna.